Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career.
In the last 40 years, Oliver Dowson has created, built, and managed 25 companies in 15 countries, and he's traveled for business and fun to over 120 other countries. He's now the host and founder of Grow Through International Expansion, an independent platform of podcast articles and videos to help business owners and executives increase the value of their businesses and lives through effective and sustainable international expansion. Oliver, thank you so much for being on today.
Raul, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So with your rich experience growing and working internationally with business, I'd like to learn a little bit more about the way that you view growth internationally, not only just for the talent pool, but in business expansion.
You mean growth in general? I'm an internationalist. I believe I'm a citizen of the world rather than a citizen of one country. I come from Britain, but I like to travel. Right now I can't, of course, not as much anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And my view is that every business almost every business has an opportunity to be international and can benefit from being international. Okay, if you're Fred's liquor store down at the corner, you are somewhat going to struggle to go international. But certainly for the vast majority of businesses, all the businesses in the services sector, any in manufacturing, should be looking to expanding across the world, working across the world in different ways, and looking beyond the usual suspect countries, because there's a big world out there.
And let's dive into that specifically for service-based companies as well as manufacturing. So because the internet has allowed us to have a shorter distance per se to go international, like I've grown teams in 9 different time zones in a very short amount of time, the key question becomes, what is the mindset that you look at when you are growing or expanding internationally? And what do you mean by expanding? Does that mean having a physical location internationally, growing your team internationally, or growing sales channels internationally?
Well, it means all of those things, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer to it because it depends upon the business you've got. I think it doesn't necessarily mean having an operation in other countries, although a lot of the time there's a great benefit to doing that, even if you think you're a sort of internet-only business. There comes a point when you've actually got to be there. So from the viewpoint of sales, there's a lot of markets out there, but there's also a lot of skills and capabilities in other countries. You can take advantage of equal or better skills in other countries, often at lower cost, often with skills that you can't get back home, language being the obvious one, but there are other things as well. And that can give an opportunity to expand. There's also an opportunity just to do part of your business in one place and part in another. So I like businesses that are like interdependent, where you've got a company that expands internationally, but where operations in each country are interreliant on the others, because it gives everybody a reason for communicating and creates my philosophy of having a cohesive international company culture across all the different cultures that you're going to get across the world, different races, different languages, different styles, different ways of working, different ways of living, but you can achieve that.
And that's definitely as you grow and build I guess the international team. And I like how you mentioned specifically that it doesn't have to be a physical location internationally; it can just be tapping into a talent pool. But let's talk about, you mentioned that it's never too early for startups to think about their international expansion. So I'm really curious in regards to what is the maybe strategy or strategic thinking that you help founders with in order to have an international plan in mind, even if it's not going to be executed in the first day or so or month, just as an example. What's that overall strategy look like?
When I talk to startup businesses, and I talk to quite a lot of them because I'm also an angel investor in some, both here and in the States and in Europe, I like to talk to them about two different ways of thinking, which I see that most startups just don't have in their DNA when they completely begin. One of those is to think in terms of where am I eventually going to sell my service to? Startups have brilliant ideas, put together great products, great developments. They have a strategy for how they're going to build and develop their business, but they tend to be looking at a market that's a market they think they understand, and that's usually their home market.
Yeah.
And if it's not just their home market, maybe, for example, it's just the English-speaking world. Is there a world beyond, UK, USA, Canada, Australia, South Africa? Yes, there is. There's a big world. How would you tap into the rest of that world, given that even those English-speaking countries only account for about 15% of the global population? So you've got to look beyond that. The other point of view is to think of how can you build your product? How can you develop it? Given the fact that however much money businesses have succeeded raising on day one, they're still always short of funds, or they always think they are. So they always want to raise more. But how can you do this more cost effectively? And your developer does not have to be sitting in the room in front of you all the time.
True.
You could have somebody on the other side of the world. Certainly the person who does your bookkeeping or your digital marketing doesn't have to be in the same room, in the same country. It doesn't have to be anywhere near you. If you've got people in 9 different time zones, just as I had when I was running my international businesses, just like me, that, there's a huge value, in fact, in being able to work around the world. In fact, you can take advantage of running 24/7 that way. But you can do things at better value. And you should be looking at, what do I need to do to develop my product? Where can I get the best ideas for it? And where can those ideas best be executed? And very often, that's not in the office you're sitting in. Hypothetical office now, we're dealing in the world of Zoom.
No, that makes sense. And I want to break that down because it's almost redesigning the business model, looking at different markets, obviously on the front end, what different markets can I service based on the value that I deliver? And then on the flip side, it's also how can I deliver value at a lower cost or faster, more efficient, or at a higher level by looking internationally. Now, I guess the question really becomes then, and you mentioned this just now, is that it's not typical, it's not in our radar usually to know where to find these opportunities or these hidden value gems. So how do you work with companies to understand where they should be looking to either expand into marketplaces, either looking internally with their business or externally to the markets, as well as how they can deliver their services at a faster, cheaper, or better?
Well, I like to actually try and get into the weeds, as you say in America, with a business founder before really being able to specifically answer that question for any one business. I think it's really important for somebody who's helping somebody expand internationally. And I think it's very difficult to do it from day one on your own if you don't have the help. I know how difficult I found it to do it. So, I wouldn't want to do it again. I think, there's skills out there, use it. But I don't think anyone who comes along and says, oh, I can solve your expansion to Australia, as simple as that, or you need to go to Australia. If they just say it on day one, they're wrong, or they're most likely to be wrong.
Be cautious about
you
it.
need to understand, what is it you're trying to build? How are you planning to build it? What are you planning to sell? Where are you going to sell it? Have you looked at these other markets? And you need a vision of a very wide international vision. I think you need to, if you're a startup business, you need to be talking to somebody who's traveled the world, who's got experience of businesses in many countries, maybe not running their own businesses always, but working with them, or visited them, maybe somebody who's been an international salesperson. There's a lot of different skills out there. I set up businesses through a combination of originally necessity and eventually through desire in lots of different countries. And I love traveling and I love going around the world. So I built an experience of businesses. But mine is one way of looking at things. It's not the only way, and I'm not the only person who can do it. So there's a lot of people with experience of different countries. But if you talk to somebody who only knows one or two or three, and you may have somebody who's, a great expert in Germany. If you decide that Germany is your market and Germany is the place you are going to for a certain thing, whether it's for skills or for market or whatever it may be, then yes, you may need to speak to somebody with a lot of deep understanding of Germany. But first steps, you need to, look at all of the countries of the world, maybe not every last one of them. But, there are many places where, I always say nobody in their right minds would expand, but there's a lot of countries that are what I call not on the usual business radar. I talk about them on our own podcast series and write articles about them sometimes. But it doesn't mean that I'm even trying to I'm not fixated on those countries or selling them. I just think that you need to have a broad vision.
And looking at all the opportunities. So it's obviously, and I want to walk through, I guess, like a thought experiment here with you. And I know that it's very, we can't do this like in a general statement because every business is unique, every market is unique, every product or service is unique, and team is unique. However, just as, I guess, a thought experiment to look at the three factors, really, it's looking at deciding which markets to expand to. And then when you select a few markets, I'd like to know what are the things that you look at before we take action. So in the first part of this, I'd like to look at how do you know which markets to look into first when you're making a decision, when you're looking at other countries in the world? What are some of the things that founders or leaders should keep in mind before they start exploring more details within each market?
Well, you've got to start somewhere. And so since you've got to start somewhere, you need to look to begin with a country that's not going to be too complicated.
Good.
And it's as simple as you don't want any more bureaucracy than you can help. You're going to hit bureaucracy everywhere, but you don't want to get into, tedious, long-running situations. It's easier for a European to set up a business in the States now than it was when I tried to set up a business in the States 20 years ago. Then I found myself in true catch-22 territory. But that's another story.
Yeah.
So my point really is that if you begin with a country that's really difficult, it might be the right one for you to go to in the medium term. But if you begin with a difficult one, then you're going to get discouraged. You're not going to sort of see the good results.
Yeah.
The other way of looking at it is, let's make an assumption for a minute that you need some sort of physical base or something, or people in another country. You can look at how about not exactly outsourcing, but creating a joint venture with some local business there. Find a local business that thinks like you, um, isn't a competitor, but is in something complementary, understands what you're trying to do, would like to build their business in the country, but is not going to sort of tread on your toes, would like to help as well. And then maybe that's a solution I found which eliminates a lot of the barriers, because you have somebody local who's already got a business set up, knows how to do it, has all the things that are, hard work to do. You've got an accountant, got somebody,
The structure
somebody to do the legal bit if it has to be done by a lawyer. All of those things are covered. You don't have to find somebody to do it, because if you find a consultant or a service in your own country who says, "Oh, we can set you up in Ethiopia," yes, I'm sure they can, but it's going to be a very expensive way of getting set up in Ethiopia compared to doing that.
Interesting.
It does carry some risk, and there's all sorts of things that could go wrong. So you do have to be a bit wise to some of those risks, but I wouldn't put anybody off. I think the benefits outweigh the risks. And talk to somebody who's done it before, and then you can be aware of it and understand what to watch out for.
So that's key. So it's understanding the needs that you have when you're looking at the markets, and like you mentioned, keeping it easy or keeping it simple, right? If a complicated market is a best fit for you, even going in with the mindset of knowing there might be bureaucracy or some difficulty to do it, but not to get put off by it, but also looking at, well, what are the other markets that we can step into or, expand to? And it's a little bit easier on the bureaucratic side or the setting up of the corporation entity or creating joint ventures. It's a great idea. I've never thought of that before. So I think the first step is assessing what are your business needs, looking at the markets that can fit those needs in the interim and the long term. And then when you're looking at each market, I'd like to know, what are some of the things that you review or that you want founders or business owners or startups to take into account before they actually decided to take action in entering a certain market?
I think they have to think through how they're actually going to run their entire business, including this new overseas entity or this new overseas relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Too many startup businesses don't have a very detailed business plan.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm old school. I was brought up, I was trained into it by American corporations, but many, many years ago, probably before most of the, I don't think I'm old, but probably before many of the listeners to this program were born. They instilled in me the need to basically have a business plan that actually is written up and says, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to do it, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And a business plan, like a sort of written document, it's quite long. It's not just a PowerPoint deck.
Yeah.
It has to be more than that. And then if you have this, it's like a sort of book of words. You can go back and read it. So it's my sort of philosophy, maybe it's an old-fashioned philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you have setting up a business and you're going to run a business, you have effectively a book of words saying, as of today, this is how I believe I'm going to run my business. This is how I believe it's going to work. And I try to think through, how are these people going to work together? So back to your point of international business, it's, suppose I now have, I'm starting from a base in Los Angeles or London,
mm-hmm.
Wherever it might happen to be. And I'm going to expand from Los Angeles to London or from London to Los Angeles. Then you've got to think, okay, fine. Whatever it is we're going to do, how are those two places going to work together?
Mm-hmm.
They're on an 8-hour time difference, which is a struggle to begin with, and that's one thing to think about. Yeah, and they're going to be doing different things. They're going to be trying to do the same things. Who here is going to need to deal with who over there?
Mm.
When are they going to need to deal with them? How much of it can they do by email, which isn't so time dependent, how much of it will they have to do by Zoom or phone or whatever it may be? You need to think through those things. And then it goes beyond that to the actual creation of work. So you can take a great advantage of time differences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for example, we used to sort of collect work in the States and send the paper, scan the paper, send the paper documents to India to be processed, and then they would process the data off all of those and send it back. And when we woke up the following morning in Chicago, it was ready
Mm-hmm.
because they did it effectively overnight. We stole a huge advantage. We stole a march on all of our competitors by being able to process things faster,
Mm-hmm.
because in fact it was an overnight service. We didn't have people sitting in the States working at night at astronomical expense. We sent it to somewhere else where people were very happy to work during their daytime and do it and send it back again. And now there's even more technology. There's even more that can be exploited. But I'm deviating, and I'm sorry, but the real key is to think how is each office going to work with each other? What's the dependencies?
Mm-hmm.
What do I need from them, and what do they need from me, and how are we going to do that? So that's a good way to start thinking about it. It's one of the components of the first stage of thinking international that I try to go through with the people I talk to.
And I think that's key, because that can also, having set expectations in the beginning will alleviate any burden of doubt. It would alleviate any headaches, truly, when it comes to missing communications, missing actions, missing deadlines. So it's interesting to point out that the first thing that you look at when you look at the markets that people want to expand to, or the clients want to expand to, is how are the teams going to work together, and how are we going to make synergy between both locations.
And I think even if you're not going to have a team in another country, suppose you're an all digital company, and you believe that you can sell your service to this other country. Yeah. And that's a very dangerous assumption to just, don't assume. But let's suppose that it's valid. Even if you do that, you've still got to think, okay, who am I selling it to in this other country? How are they going to react? When are they going to react? Are they going to understand what we're saying? I'm British, you're American. You know that we're two cultures divided by a common language, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much a matter of you say tomato and I say tomato, yeah. And even that expand it to a world of business, and it's not so simple. When you move into other cultures and other things, it's more difficult. So if you're trying to sell something online, it might be very simple to think, well, this is just like Amazon. I just sort of, put my widgets on the screen, and people make it look pretty and attractive, and people will just click and buy. Mm-hmm. And I wake up in the morning, and all I have to do is to fulfill the orders. It's probably not that simple. What happens when people have a question? Where does that get referred to? You may overlook the fact that at the moment in your own country, you're doing something, or you've thought about how you're going to resolve certain issues. Mm-hmm. But if those issues came up in another country, would you be able to resolve them the same way? So there's lots of things to think about.
When it comes to, we're focusing a lot on the process too, which is interesting, which I think is overseen when it comes to obviously looking at the obvious advantages, faster turnaround, creating more value or better value at a cheaper cost, et cetera, or being able to sell and grow in that way. But we're looking more now in regards to, if I was able to solve a certain issue in this country, let's say we're talking in South America, have a team over there, and then a similar issue comes up, let's say in Europe or in India or in the Philippines, how are we able to resolve those issues? Think about those issues first, so understand what issues may come up, and then how we're going to address it depending on the time zones, communication styles, as well as language. So I think that's an interesting point to bring up for founders considering looking to expand internationally. Excellent. Well, Oliver, I think that next steps, what would you suggest for listeners to do if they're looking to expand? What are some practical actions that they can take today to start exploring international expansion?
They can look at the two key areas of their business and start with those. It's not the whole story, but it's part of it. And that is, what needs to do as a company to develop, maintain, build their service or product, whatever it is they're trying to sell, and think about, with an open mind, how much of that do I have to do here, and how much of it could be done somewhere else? That's one point of view. And the other thing they need to think about is, one day, even if not on day one, even if not in year one, even if not in year 3, I'm going to want to sell what I do to other countries. And even if what I'm doing looks like it only works in my country, I will be ambitious. And even if I'm not overly ambitious today, I will be in the future. So I want to sell this. What am I going to want to sell in another country? And how are other people, other markets, going to react to my product or service? And what changes will I need to make to that product or service today in planning it to make sure that when I do go international, it's an easy switch to be able to sell it there.
I love that proactive thought. So looking at it first, what are the two key areas of your business? What needs to be done here in your home country? And what can we, delegate or create a different team internationally? And then second, looking to the future, right? Looking to what can we sell? How can we pivot or change or modify or adapt the product or service to fit the current market, have economies of scale or have a certain profit margin? Just it's an easy way to start, and being able to build those relationships to expand.
Exactly. And I think that even if it's not an immediate plan, even if it can't be executed immediately because there's no funds to do it, there's no time to do it, time being the scarcest commodity, if entrepreneurs think about those things, then all the other myriad little thoughts that need to be had about international expansion will they fit somewhere between those two camps.
I love that. I like how you simplified it. It's not a simple process, but I love how you were able to simplify that to take action on. Well, Oliver, for our listeners, what's the best place they can go to thank you for this episode and reach out to you?
Well, I would love it if they would log into our platform, growinternational.org, and they can actually click on the subscribe button there. Subscribe is free. Or they can install the Grow International app, which is on both Android and Apple platforms. And they'll find all our episodes, our podcasts, and the articles there. And if, as I hope, some of your listeners want to talk about international expansion, I'd be very happy to talk to them. They can find my contact details on the growinternational.org website, and introductory chats come free.
Awesome, Oliver. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to speaking further with you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Raul. Do good work.